Rose Knight, South Korea's very first child nurturing sim by Seron Software, was released in May 1996. And at that time, Princess Maker Deluxe, which included both Princess Maker 1 and 2, were being released domestically. And on top of that, Mercurius Pretty, another big shot life simulation nurturing game, was also localized and released at the same time. Though I couldn't find any info on the sales on Rose Knight, it was definitely going against some tough competition. Nonetheless, for some reason, like many mediocre to bad South Korean games of the 90s, Rose Knight, perhaps by pretending to deliver a lesser but similar experience to Princess Maker, was exported to Taiwan. Taiwan returned its favor with their own share of bad life sims, so I guess that makes it a draw. According to this article, of the games exported in early 1997, Rose Knight was the only title to receive a request to send additional copies. I guarantee this has nothing to do with the quality of the game, but it either was riding on the popularity of Princess Maker, or they initially delivered like 2 copies to make that article technically true. Before I start the introductions, I should point out the jewel case package art for Rose Knight, because it looks like some badly photoshopped image of a pair of legs with an awkwardly positioned sword between them, which immediately reminded me of the poster for Your Eyes Only. It looks like whoever designed this mangled the legs, cut out the crossbow, painted over them, and tried their darndest to make the object look more sword-like. The quote on the cover reads, "An emotional journey that comes together with a dramatic plot." While the box art is giving me bad vibes, let us find out if any part of that claim is true. Like the Princess Maker series, Rose Knight presents a brief summary on its premise before beginning the game. The player character, who soon revealed to be the father, is a wandering swordsman who was once the captain of the guard of a fallen kingdom. One day, by pure chance, when he was walking in the forest, he happens to discover the sole surviving heir to the befallen throne. Raised by beasts, the little girl who lost her birthright was now no more than an animal, and even her meager life was under the mercy of an admiral of the opposing empire who conquered her land. Both he and the wandering swordsman, who happened to be in the same place at the same time, recognized the pendant adorned by the beast-like girl, a pendant bearing the royal crest. The swordsman kneels down before the admiral and begs him, saying she is no one other than his long-lost daughter, and asks for mercy. It is a lie that falls short, but for some reason the admiral shows pity, accepting his plea, but under one condition, that every month she must travel to the city to meet his son Christ, and 2 must cross swords to see who is a better warrior. Wandering swordsman, now the father, accepts his offer with the determination that one day he'll raise the girl to become, in his words, a powerful female warrior, and she shall bring the lost kingdom back to its glory days. Like any Princess Maker styled game, you take the position of the father, but this time, the father's got a portrait. When we first see him in the prologue, he looks like a fairly young Ikegami Ryoichi character. But in-game, he's suddenly transformed into a grandpa who looks like an old master right out of a Uziah film, despite the game taking place almost immediately after the prologue. For some reason, Rose Knight bothered to specify the father's year of birth, which is 1626. Rose Knight starts in 6080, making him 54 years old. Maybe he dyed his hair and put on a fake beard to look more imposing, or maybe he put up a disguise. But there's no point in hiding now because the admiral of the opposing empire definitely knows who he is. Or rather, we should further analyze the lore and the cultural motive which the creators of the game were shaped under to find the true answer behind this sudden aging. According to the prologue, the daughter was discovered 5 years after the fall of her kingdom. In-game info reveals her birth year to be 1676, making her just 4 years old at the start of the game. Although traditionally in East Asia and other parts of the world, a newborn is accounted to be an 1-year-old, so she might technically be 5. Unrelated to this topic, but the legal age reckoning system in Korea will change on June 28, 2023, so at this day, every South Korean person will be aging back a year or 2. However, the above information reveals that the game begins right after the prologue. You might question how can a feral child acquire language skills and articulations above the levels of her peers when the time for education was so limited, if reconditioning her back to society is ever even possible? The answer lies in how the father aged tremendously so quick, perhaps overexerting himself. This in itself is such an obvious implication, but even if you haven't figured out the truth yet, don't blame yourself if you're a native English speaker, or even Japanese, or even whoever not familiar to the East Asian cultural sphere. The father obviously used his inner cultivated energy to open her chi flow from her lower dantian leading up to the Bahui point to stimulate her higher dantian, but ended up exhausting too much life force because of the impurities blocking her energy paths. Moving on. Notice that unlike Princess Maker, only recognizable face in the prologue is that of the father, and the daughter's face remains hidden. You later know this tells a lot about this game. But before going any deeper, let's talk about how the game even plays. In fact, it's just as crazy. First, the game starts with naming the father and the daughter. Leave the naming box blank if you want. The game proceeds regardless. Actually, both of them have canon names, only known source for the former being the preview articles. The father is called Geronimo, and the daughter is called Cecilia. The main objective of this game is to raise your daughter between the period of January 1680 to December 1691 for the span of 12 years. Keep in mind, once you reach December 30th, 1681, by the way, every month in this game has 30 days, the game instantly jumps forward 3 years, continuing at January 1685. And when you reach December 30th, 1686, the game jumps again to January 1690, skipping over yet another 3 years. The game comes to an end once you hit December 30th, 1691. So technically, you only have the in-game time of 6 years to raise your daughter, because Rose Knight made this bizarre design choice to leap over 3 years after every 2 years of gameplay. I'm guessing one of the initial selling point of this product was having a grander scale than Princess Maker, so this might have been a cheap way to pretend that the player get to raise the daughter for a span of 12 years, which is literally longer compared to 8 years of the Princess Maker series. Why stop at 12? Might as well add another 10,000. Just like Princess Maker, the game is divided in a monthly section. Save, load, and quit are available at the beginning of every month. Clicking outside of the menu space will produce a horrible ear-splitting static sound. No confirmation message is displayed upon save loads. On quitting, the game kicks you straight to DOS. Every time you boot the game, Rose Knight welcomes you with a good old copyright protection screen. Mistakenly clicking on quit happens more often than not because of the uniquely shaped game cursor that takes the form of a rose stem. The pointer is located on the tip of the rose, so if you're not precise, attempting to click save will lead to selecting quit because it is placed right below save. Just like Princess Maker, the daughter, Cecilia's standing sprite reflects on her condition. In Princess Maker, for most of the time, the daughter's condition is affected by stress, but here, stress is not indicated in the status menu. But the game does have restification commands, so can there be some kind of hidden stat? Upon reading the preview article, what I learned is that the mathematics behind the character stat is needlessly complicated. The 9 stats are grouped into 3 main stats, and her condition mirrors one of the 3 largest stats with the highest average. However, even that doesn't work properly, because sometimes Cecilia's expression changes to one from another with a single right click. Wow, what a face. If you haven't guessed yet, like how in Princess Maker 2, the daughter has a happy state, a delinquent state, and a sexy state, Cecilia has a stupid state. If Rose Knight and Newlyweds taught us anything, it is a widely held belief in Korea that receiving poor education causes brain damage, resulting in short-term memory loss and a derpy facial expression. Cecilia is given 9 stats, way less stats than Princess Maker, but that does not in any way simplify the game mechanic. Princess Maker is a prime example of giving the players a sense of control, even while tasking them with a ton of stats. Rose Knight, on the other hand, can say the complete opposite. Like, stats are displayed in these teeny tiny progress bars that do not show you any numerical values, which is always a reliable indicator in discovering a shitty stat-derived life sim. Only the power of cheats let me know that the numeric max for each stat are set on 10,000. Every month is divided into 3 sessions of 10 days, allowing you to execute 3 commands per month. Cecilia can either take lessons, do a part-time job, or rest. In the Princess Maker series, as indicated in the command icons, both the cost for the lesson and the fees for the part-time job are measured by their daily rates. Therefore, in case you run out of money during the week the daughter is taking her lesson, she will stop receiving benefits starting at the day she cannot pay for school. And if she fails a day during her work, the day worth of salary will get deducted from her total. As far as game mechanics go, it's as simple as it gets. And with every command, the players can see the visual representation of the stat moving upwards and downwards, along with numbers adding and subtracting, which can be strangely satisfying. What Rose Knight did to the stat bar is to hide as many information as possible. You're given no information on how much the lessons costs and how much the job pays. This is because every exchange of stats and money are predetermined in a fixed structure. Let me explain. There is no point in monitoring values because there is no controllable variable, such as stress, that affects the success rate of your actions because the concept of a dice roll plays a minuscule role in this game since everything is set at the end of the month. The game's economics are problematic to say the least. Think about it. The max amount of money you can carry is 9,900 gold, but each lesson costs at least 1,100 to 1,400 per month. That's for 3 sessions. Compare that to 400, the largest amount of money you can cash in a month at the early stage of the game. But you can exploit this broken mechanic because the game doesn't even bother to check whether you have enough money to complete every command you've scheduled for the month. That means saving up enough money for a single session and scheduling to receive 3 sessions will still take you to the next month. The game will not notice that you ran out of money and will proceed as if you paid for everything. This should have made the game a piece of cake, if this game was any less broken, that is. Let's talk about the combat skill as an example. Let's say you took combat lessons for an entire month. 3 sessions boost 750 in combat skills, but then deducts a whopping 900 on each magic, arts, and charm. So should you take lessons on magic, arts, and charm to make up on the losses? Well, the following chart is what you can expect. So in exchange of 450 in combat, you lose 540 in magic, 300 in speed, 100 in arts, 1410 in charm, and 1390 in science. Don't hope for the part-time jobs to contribute to anything. A month worth of frog hunting, the best job to raise combat skills, gives 900 in fighting but loses 1200 in manners. You're screwed either way. I need to stop for a moment here. Are those shackles on their arms and legs? Is everyone in this command animation enslaved? What kind of frog-catching job puts a 4-year-old girl in a black bondage suit and make her crawl around in all fours in a swamp? Now I'll talk more on how messed up the whole stat mechanic can get. No, I'm not done. You see, the aforementioned ups and downs on stats are not consistent. I'll give you an example. I observed the same combat skills command gain 750 in combat while losing a mere 30 in negatively affected stats. Initially, it seemed attempting to improve in higher stats resulted in lesser yield and greater loss, but even that wasn't the case. In the end, I failed to pinpoint the logic behind the stat raising part of the game. I can only guess it might have something to do with Cecilia's facial expressions, which supposedly reflects her average stats, though I remember refuting that claim. In other words, this game is chaos. Since the education in this empire failed our children, I guess we're only left with the power of stat-raising items like in Newlyweds, assuming that you're rich enough. Shopping pretty much works like in Princess Maker, as in there's an armorer, item shop, and a restaurant. In Princess Maker 2, items are divided into 3 categories: consumables, equipments including weapons and dresses, and items that stack up such as teacups and books. In Rose Knight, every item belongs to the first category. Every purchase immediately causes permanent change in stats, and just like the lessons, the stat loss compared to the gain is so devastating that every item in actuality is cursed. For example, a ring worth 3,000 gives a measly plus 30 increase in manners and charm, with a permanent minus 30 penalty in combat skills and magic. Dresses, not only every one of them are downright ugly, the most expensive one that costs 5,000 takes away 500 in combat skills to reward you with a pathetic 50 increase in charm. Okay, are there any elements or events that can help me with this game? There are contests like the Harvest Festival in Princess Maker series. In fact, various contests are held once every 4 months. However, the winners are hard-coded into the game no matter how high Cecilia's stats are. She has no chance of winning anything. The world is indeed harsh and brutal. The point is, contests are useless. It's just another thing that exists because Princess Maker had it. Okay, why are the girls in shackles and wearing bondage suits while competing? Is that a 4-year-old shaking her booty in a dance contest? Speaking of useless, do you remember the part in the prologue where the Admiral let Cecilia live under the condition that she should engage in a monthly sword sparring against his son, Christ? The game displays uncharacteristic consistency by actually making this a part of the game. Well, to be accurate, they get to fight every 2 months instead of a monthly duel, but even that becomes redundant really fast. As you might have guessed by now, no, the duel contributes nothing to the gameplay or the ending. It is possible for Cecilia to win once in a while, but towards the last year, Christ always gets the upper hand no matter how better her stats are. It's not like this game has a functioning RPG map like Princess Maker did, so it must have something to do with him being a boy, I guess. Surprisingly, especially for the world of Rose Knight, losing doesn't feel that bad. Christ is a good sport, win or lose. Intended or not, the conversation between Cecilia and Christ feels like a light teasing and bantering between childhood friends. Given them being born from opposing nations, it can be interpreted as pretty wholesome. The Admiral, on the other hand, acts like a jerk. If Christ loses, he complains that a proper woman should exude elegance and class, and berates Christ for losing and admonishes him by doubling his workload. He seems really chummy with the father though. Speaking of which, as soon as the game begins, what you'll see is Cecilia and her father bantering on starting off their new year with a training routine. They speak as if he has been training her for many years, but remember, according to the information we've gathered thus far, Cecilia at this point can't be older than 4 years old, and she would have been at least 4 when adopted. Like I said before, it all makes sense once you accept the father is a Wuxia master. Another abnormality you might have noticed is that the player character, the father, talks. Of course, the father from the Princess Maker series did have a line or two, but that was more like dialoguing the conversation menu rather than him having his own voice. Nothing like the Rose Knight father who not only talks, but literally talks more than his daughter. This is another case of a chronic problem South Korean video games were going through at that time. Failing to understand the meta-narrative of video game media and feeling the necessity to enable the player character who's predominantly male as direct proxy who voices the writing, at a failed attempt to elicit empathy from the predominantly male players. Rose Knight is a prime example of that symptom because with every sentence Cecilia speaks, the father has about 5 sentences in response, and even most of her lines are either responding to the father or whoever she's interacting with. The father is a type of person who feels the need to express his opinion on every word spoken and unspoken by his daughter. So even a short trip to a shop involves him confronting her on her whereabouts, her response, and him telling her to watch out for weird people, which reveals yet another unnecessary specific albeit weird information that she's doing her own shopping alone, unlike in Princess Maker where the father accompanies the daughter. The Rose Knight father trusts a 4-year-old in a city, let alone in a land conquered by the Empire who has eradicated her family, when at least already one person who's the Admiral of the Empire knows her royal heritage. He must be naive enough to believe that the Admiral bought into his lie about Cecilia being his real daughter, or he must trust him enough to depend him and his daughter's safety entirely upon his whim. Either way, had this been Long Live the Queen, it'd be game over in the first month. Speaking of which, this game, as a matter of fact, has a needlessly excessive lore which I won't bother to dig any deeper because not only the whole setup is kind of generic and adds nothing to the gaming experience, it instead attracts attention to all the contradictions presented in the game. What's wrong with a good old adopting an orphan or a fairy or a child descended from the heavens? And we still have so much to talk about the father. When a 4-year-old Cecilia sighs and complains to herself about going through another boring week of study, the father downright tells her to shut up and do her duties. He can also send his 14-year-old daughter off to a questionable part-time job. Well, the players are the ones making that choice, but him acting all smug and telling Cecilia to go gain some social experience ripped the agency right off our hands. We're also not responsible for her wearing a bondage suit the whole time, so I was free of all guilt. Like any Princess Maker 2 clone, every month you're given one free action to talk to the daughter. You have 3 options: encourage, advise, and discipline, though it contributes nothing to the gameplay.